So you want to unlock a little more happiness in your lives, huh? Well, you're not alone. We've had a ton of requests to dive into the happening of happiness, and let me tell you, this book really gets into why finding joy these days can feel, well, kind of tricky. Right off the bat, it says that happiness is achievable, but our modern lives throw up some pretty big roadblocks, often in ways we don't even realize.
It's like our minds haven't quite figured out this whole 21st century thing yet, you know?
Yeah, totally.
And a big part of that is this constant back and forth between our conscious minds, the ones we think we're in control of, and our subconscious.
Like how much power our subconscious actually has over how we feel.
Yeah, exactly. Even though it's kind of working behind the scenes.
Right, right.
And here's the thing, the subconscious isn't always thinking about our happiness in the same way we might think about it.
Interesting.
Its priorities are way more like primal, you know, safety, balance, avoiding threats. The problem is those threats nowadays are more likely to be like an overflowing inbox than an actual saber-toothed tiger.
And the book actually compares our subconscious to a 5-year-old. Like everything is really black and white, easy to overwhelm, and forget about sarcasm.
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
hilarious because the book says when we're using like negative self-talk, thinking we're being funny or motivating ourselves, our subconscious is taking it as a literal command.
Totally. It's like constantly telling a little kid they're not good enough. That message is going to sink in, even if you don't mean it that way.
Wow. And what about that whole thing where, like, even if we're just imagining something bad happening, our subconscious freaks out as if it's really happening?
Exactly. Think about how much time we spend worrying about things that haven't even happened or might never happen. But to our subconscious, that worry feels like a very real threat.
It's like flooding our system with stress hormones 24/7.
Exactly. And it's no wonder we're feeling the pressure.
Especially with how modern life keeps us so on edge.
Right. It's constant.
The book really breaks it down. Information overload, that pressure to be on all the time, thanks to technology, those crazy expectations we see everywhere. It's a lot.
And the thing is, in terms of evolution, these are all really new stressors for us to be dealing with.
Oh, what's his point?
Our brains and bodies are basically trying to adapt to a pace of life that humans have never, ever experienced before.
So it's like we're playing catch up, but the rules keep changing.
Exact.
And the always-on work culture is a perfect example.
Oh, tell me about it.
You know, the book talks about how we're losing that essential downtime, that space to just unwind and recharge, which used to be built into our lives.
It's true. And then on top of that, there's this constant pressure to consume, consume, consume.
Yeah, and not even just like buying stuff.
Right. It's information, experiences, keeping up with everyone's social media. It creates this feeling like we never have enough, which goes right back to that primal fear of scarcity our subconscious is always worried about.
Oh, totally. It's like we're on this treadmill, constantly running, but that finish line just keeps moving further and further away.
100%.
And speaking of social media, I thought it was fascinating how the book dug into that whole thing about the illusion of connection versus how it can really mess with our self-esteem.
Right. Because what we see on social media is often so carefully curated, it's like a highlight reel. It's not a true reflection of real life.
Oh, for sure.
But our subconscious doesn't really know the difference, right? So we end up comparing our behind the scenes to everyone else's highlight reel, which is basically a recipe for feeling like we just don't measure up.
Totally. Like everyone else has their life perfectly figured out, and we're the only ones struggling.
Exactly. And that's where this idea of message units comes in, which I thought was so interesting.
Yeah, what are those again? Remind me.
So the happening of happiness talks about how our subconscious minds are basically like sponges, just constantly absorbing information from all around us. Everything, every interaction, every image, every news headline we see, it all gets processed and stored as a message unit.
And like those messages add up over time.
Exactly. And eventually they start to shape our beliefs about ourselves and the world around us. So if we're constantly being bombarded with messages that make us feel stressed or not good enough or scared, well, our subconscious is going to internalize that.
And that's when we start to see the real impact on how happy we feel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It can be like having this low hum of anxiety running in the background, even if we're not consciously aware of it.
Wow. I never thought about it like that.
And it can affect everything. Our sleep, our relationships, our energy levels, even just our overall sense of being content.
It's like our subconscious is trying to wave its hands and sound the alarm, but we're too busy scrolling through Instagram to notice.
Exactly. And that's the best part. The happening of happiness doesn't just, point out the problem and leave us hanging. It actually gives us some really solid solutions, too.
Okay, so let's talk solutions. If our subconscious is drowning in all these like negative messages, how do we flip the script? What can we actually do to start feeling it something healthier?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. The book talks about this idea of reframing our priorities. And it's not about pretending stress doesn't exist, because let's be real, that's impossible.
Yeah, that's asking a lot.
Right. It's more about figuring out what really matters for, genuine well-being, even when life feels crazy.
And those priorities are super specific in the book, right? Like it lays out what it calls the 5 pillars of a fulfilling life. What are those again?
Okay, so it's like building a house. You need a strong foundation, right? These pillars are like that foundation, but for a happy life. So we're talking about taking care of our physical health,
Makes sense.
building meaningful relationships with others,
So important.
prioritizing personal growth,
Okay,
finding ways to contribute to something bigger than ourselves,
I like that.
and staying connected to nature.
Oh, that's a good one. So
What-
it's about finding balance across all those different areas.
Exactly. And the book actually uses this great analogy of a wheel with spokes. If one area of your life is getting way more attention or not enough, the whole thing starts to wobble.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And we see it all the time, right? Someone's hyper-focused on their career, crushing it on paper, but their health, relationships, their own need to just chill out, totally neglected.
It's like they're on a hamster wheel, going super fast but getting nowhere.
100%.
There's that saying, right?
Yeah.
No one ever wished they'd spent more time at the office on their deathbed.
Right. And the happening of happiness doesn't just talk about these pillars like some vague idea either. It actually gives you steps to actually weave them into your life.
Okay, so walk me through some of these steps. What does it say? What are some of the things we can do?
One of the biggest things for me was learning to say no. And not just to protect our time or whatever, but as a way to train our subconscious to actually value our own needs.
Because every time we overextend ourselves to make someone else happy.
Exactly. It's like telling ourselves that our needs are less important.
So it's not about like becoming totally selfish.
No, not at all.
It's more about like setting healthy boundaries.
Exactly. When we can say no to some things, it actually frees us up to say a much bigger, more genuine yes to the things that truly light us up.
Love that. What about sleep? I feel that's always
Yeah.
a big one.
Oh, for sure. And the book talks about it in a way I'd never thought of before.
Oh, really?
How so?
It goes way beyond that classic 8 hours a night thing.
Because that doesn't work for everyone.
Right. And it's not even just about the quantity, it's the quality of our sleep too. Like how crucial darkness and quiet are for our bodies to really, truly rest and reset.
It's almost like we're supposed to be in sync with the natural rhythms of day and night, but we've kind of messed with that.
Totally. And that actually ties in perfectly to another thing the book talks about, getting back in touch with nature. It seems so simple, but I feel like we really underestimate how powerful it can be.
Yeah, just stepping outside for a few minutes can totally change my whole mood. There's something about being in nature that just feels restorative. The
Mhm.
book actually cites all these studies showing that spending time outdoors can help lower stress, boost creativity, and even strengthen our social connections.
I totally believe it.
It's like our subconscious can finally, relax a little. It doesn't have to be on high alert all the time.
Oh, and can we talk about the meditation part?
Oh.
It felt kind of out there at first, but honestly, I found that section surprisingly useful.
Right. A lot of people tell me that. And honestly, I get it. It's just one of those things that really works.
For sure. But I think it's the way the book talks about meditation that clicked for me. It's not about sitting there for an hour trying to empty your mind.
Right. It's not some mystical thing. It's way simpler than that.
Exactly. It's more about creating space to just be present with your thoughts and feelings without judging them.
100%. And it's amazing what happens when we give ourselves permission to just be for a few minutes. We're so used to being on all the time.
Yeah, like hitting the pause button on that constant stream of thoughts for a minute.
Exactly.
It's like creating a little pocket of peace in our otherwise crazy, busy lives.
And something else I thought was really interesting. The book also talks about allowing ourselves to actually feel our emotions instead of bottling them up all the time.
Oh, yeah. Like even anger, because that always gets such a bad rap.
Yep, even anger.
So it's saying that, like, anger itself isn't bad. It's more about how we choose to express it that matters.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And honestly, that goes for all our emotions, right?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like, the book emphasizes finding healthy ways to express what we're feeling
Hmm.
instead of trying to, like, shove them down or letting them totally run the show.
So instead of just reacting to our emotions,
Hmm.
we can learn to actually respond to
Yeah.
them, like more intentionally.
Yes, exactly. And that definitely takes practice, right?
Oh, for sure.
It's about building self-awareness and emotional intelligence, which the book says are, like, essential skills if you want to actually enjoy life in this day and age.
Totally. And honestly, I think one of the biggest things we need to relearn is that it's okay to not be happy all the time.
Yeah. It's like this pressure cooker.
I know, right? As if we're doing something wrong, if we're not like constantly joyful and totally fulfilled.
It's so unrealistic.
Right.
And The Happening of Happiness actually talks about how important it is to just embrace the whole human experience, you know?
Yeah, like the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Exactly. All of it.
So it's not about chasing some impossible dream of being blissed out 24/7. It's more about accepting that life has these natural ups and downs
For sure.
and learning how to ride those waves with a little more grace,
Yeah.
a little more self-compassion, you know.
100%. And that includes forgiving ourselves for not being perfect.
Ugh, yes.
Like,
Like letting go of those mistakes, the times we didn't get it right, just accepting that we're all a work in progress, right?
yeah.
I love that. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. The power of our subconscious, how modern life kind of throws us off track, and then some really tangible steps we can take to create more joy and, well, just live a more fulfilling life.
Mhm.
But the happening of happiness goes even deeper than that, doesn't it? It dives into this whole idea of finding real meaning in our lives, which feels kind of different from just being happy.
Yeah, totally. It's about tapping into the sense of purpose, you
Right.
know, something that gives your life direction and weight, even beyond just your own personal happiness.
And it's not necessarily about some big, huge, world-changing mission, right?
Oh, not at all. It
Yeah.
could be something as small as being a really present friend or going after a creative passion or finding a way to show up for your community. It's really about figuring out what matters to you.
Yeah, what lights you up?
Exactly. It's about taking those values, those passions, and figuring out how to bring them to life in a way that feels true to you.
I love that. And this might seem like a jump, but the book even talks about death, doesn't it?
That does.
And not in like a morbid way, but as a way to put things into perspective.
Yeah, like a reminder to really appreciate the life you have right now.
It's about embracing how precious life is,
Mhm.
right? Like when we can actually acknowledge that it won't last forever, it can actually push us to really live more fully in this moment, to not put off our dreams, to really cherish the time we have with people we love.
That's beautifully said.
Oh, thanks. It's like that saying, life is too short to, fill in the blank.
Exactly.
Too
yeah.
short to hate your job, to hold on to grudges.
Yeah,
Too short not to just go for it, whatever it is for you.
I love that.
Me too. So as we wrap things up, I want to hear from you, dear listener. What are your biggest takeaways from The Happening of Happiness? What resonated with you the most?
Yes. We want to hear from you.
If you're feeling overwhelmed by, well, everything, and you're looking for a way to feel more fulfilled, The Happening of Happiness really does lay out a powerful path forward.
It's not about following some rigid set of rules. It's more about figuring out how you want to move through the world in a way that prioritizes your well-being, those genuine connections, and that deep sense of meaning.
It's about understanding the power of your own mind
Yes.
and making choices that actually feel good on every level.
It's about creating a life and maybe even a world where we can all finally exhale and relax, knowing we're safe, connected, and moving in a direction that feels right, you know?
I love that. Such a good reminder. Okay, that's it for our deep dive into The Happening of Happiness. Thank you so much for exploring these ideas with us today. If you're hungry for more insights and those actionable steps to unlock even more joy and fulfillment in your life, definitely check out the book. It's full of them.
It's so good.
It is. Until next time, keep those happiness vibes flowing.